stone tower, overlooking a valley that had forgotten how to listen, hung the bell. It was massive, bronze, ancient. Its surface had weathered decades of wind and rain, turning green with the patina of neglect. It had fallen silent several decades earlier. The clapper had stilled. The last time it had rung, the people now living in the valley had not yet been born, nor had their parents. The bronze no longer vibrated in the air, but the bell remembered. The rope, thick, frayed, and dust-covered, hung motionless from the bell's yoke, descending through a narrow shaft into the empty room below. No hand had touched it in living memory. The bell remembered every hand that had ever pulled the rope, every face that had looked up as its voice rolled across the valley, every wedding, every funeral, every celebration, every warning, every moment when the community needed to be called together. Only now, the bell had become architecture, a fixture, a landmark that no longer served its purpose. People would point to the tower and say, "That's the old bell tower," the way they'd point to a mountain or a river. Something that simply was, not something that did anything. And somewhere deep in the bronze, in the metal's memory of vibration, the bell waited and held all of it. Not in memory, because bronze does not have a brain. It held it in molecular memory, in the way the metal had been shaped by fire and intention, in the way it had vibrated at a certain frequency so many times that the frequency had become part of its structure. The bell was not silent. It was resonating at a frequency no one could hear. A child came to the tower one afternoon, not seeking anything, just exploring, the way children do. But here is what the child did not know. The bell had been waiting for him. Not specifically. The bell did not know this child. But the bell knew someone would come. Someone always comes. Bells are not made to hang forever in silence. They are made to be rung. And the universe has a way of bringing hands to ropes. The door at the base was unlocked. It had been for years. Who would want what lay inside? The child climbed the worn stone stairs, spiraling upward into dust and shadow. As he climbed, something strange happened. He began to hear, not with ears, with something deeper. Faint impressions of sound, the ghost of a vibration, the echo of every ring that had ever rung in this tower, still humming in the stone, in the air. The child didn't understand it, but he felt it. At the top, a single room, empty, except for the rope. The child looked up, saw the rope disappear into the darkness above, heard faintly the creak of ancient iron where the bell hung in its cradle. He didn't know the history, didn't know the decades of silence. Didn't know that no one had pulled this rope since before his grandparents were children. He was just a child with a rope in his hands. But the bell knew him. And so, with the child's hand wrapped around the rope, he pulled. Something extraordinary happened. The bell did not ring. The mechanism groaned. Dust showered from above. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Just the protest of rust and time. And then, bong. The sound was not a sound. It was a presence. It moved through the stone walls as if they weren't there. It rolled across the valley like thunder given purpose. It reached the farthest farmhouse, the deepest forest, the oldest ears, and the newest graves. It was a resurrection. It carried within it every ring that had ever been, every voice that had ever been lifted, every moment that had ever mattered to the people of this valley. The child did not create the sound. He released it. The bell had spoken. The bell had been full, overflowing, with decades of accumulated resonance. The silence was never empty. It was a storehouse, a gathering, a preparation. When the child pulled, everything came out at once. The past and the present mingled. The voices of the ancestors carried on the same vibration as this child's voice. In houses across the valley, people stopped, looked up. Some wept without knowing why. Some smiled. Some felt a memory rise, not of the bell, since they'd never heard it, but of something else, something that had been waiting. The child, still holding the rope, felt the vibration travel up his arms and into his chest. He had made that. He had done it. He pulled again.
GPS network subliminal message.
Moral of the story. The bell had not lost its voice. It had only been waiting for someone to believe it still mattered. The rust was real. The decades were real. The silence was real. But none of it had changed what the bell was. It was still bronze, still hung, still capable of filling a valley with sound the moment someone had the courage to pull it. Here is the truth this story reveals about you. You are that bell. For years, maybe decades, you have been silent. You stopped speaking up in meetings. You stopped sharing your writing. You stopped singing. You stopped telling people what you really think, what you really feel, what you really need. The rope has hung there, untouched, for so long, you've forgotten it exists. You tell yourself, it's been too long. No one remembers my voice. The world has moved on. I'd just be rusty, just noise. But here is what the bell knows you've forgotten. Bronze does not forget how to ring. The silence did not damage the bell. It only hid it. The moment someone pulls, the moment you pull, the sound that emerges is not a relic of the past. It is a force in the present. Your voice has not atrophied. It has been resonating in silence, gathering energy, and waiting for its moment. This is the use it or lose it fallacy. We believe that if we don't use a skill, we lose it. That's true for some things. Muscle, memory, fluency, but not for essence. Your essence, your perspective, your truth, your unique way of seeing the world does not degrade with disuse. It marinates. It deepens. It gathers weight. The bell was no less of a bell after decades of silence. It was more of a bell because every year of silence added to the story, the significance, and the moment when someone would finally pull. So here is your question for today. Which rope have you stopped pulling? What voice have you silenced? Not because you couldn't speak, but because you convinced yourself no one wanted to hear it. The valley is still there. The people are still there. Somewhere in that valley, someone is waiting for the exact sound only you can make. You don't need to practice. You don't need to warm up. You don't need to wait until you're ready. You just need to pull. The rust will fall away. The dust will clear. And the sound that fills the valley will be yours. Finally, as you remember, you were always meant to ring. Pull the rope.
Microscope, telescope, radars, like satellites, GPS, network, subliminal message.